The ultimate goal of computer forensics is to produce evidence for legal cases. To achieve this, there are 4 objectives you need to keep in mind. The first objective is to prepare for an investigation by ensuring the integrity of the evidence. For example, write protecting your evidence medium. The ultimate goal so that you don't accidentally write over is to produce evidence for legal cases. To achieve this, there are 4 objectives. Objective is to acquire data. This includes the ultimate goal of computer forensics is to produce evidence for legal cases. To achieve this, there are 4 objectives you need to keep in mind. The first objective is to prepare for an investigation by ensuring the integrity of the evidence. For example, write protecting your evidence medium so that you don't accidentally write over it. The second objective is to acquire data. This includes making a copy of your evidence medium so that when you're doing your investigation, you only work on the copy rather than the evidence medium itself. Once you have your data acquired, the next step is to analyze the data. Conducting a search based on a keyword to find an incriminating piece of evidence could be a good example of analyzing the data. Finally, the last step is to identify evidence and present it in the form of a written report. A lot of times, these reports are auto-generated by your computer forensics tool, but you often have to edit them. When these objectives of computer forensics are accomplished, it's safe to say that an investigator is now ready to submit the evidence. Computer forensics originated from practical needs in the law enforcement community. Criminals started using computers to commit crimes, and officers in the trenches simply had to deal with this new phenomenon. One of the first official recognitions of computer forensics in the US as a separate field of its own was the formation of a Computer Analysis Response Team, or CART, by Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, in 1984. As the field matured, more players appeared. Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, or FLETC, started offering training in collecting digital data. International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, published a new standard called ISO 17025, General Requirement for the Competence of Testing and Calibration Laboratories, in 2005. Since crimes have no borders, countries also had to work together to reconcile the differences in their laws to successfully prosecute criminals. Europeans led this effort and played a major role in establishing a treaty of the Convention on Cybercrime in 2004, and the U.S. signed the treaty. As an astute viewer, you may notice the change of terms used here. The word cyber is a shorthand for cyberspace and refers to a virtual environment where exchanges of information occur between computing devices. The word cybercrime emphasizes the fact that computer crimes are no longer confined in a single, isolated machine, but touch on a collection of devices connected through a communications network, which is often the Internet. The term cybercrime complements the more conventional label, computer crime. Therefore, we're increasingly seeing both computer and cyber used together in media, as in computer and cyber forensics. You can also use digital forensics to cover both computer and cyber forensics because digital means anything touching on zeros and ones, which computers and cyberspaces do. Since its humble beginning in the 1970s, computer forensics has seen an explosive growth and continues to expand its scope. Newly emerging technologies such as Internet of Things, or IoT, are constantly pushing the limits of the field. I'm sure that IoT will soon be replaced by some future successor, which will help keep expanding the field of digital forensics. There are two primary types of computer forensic investigations. One is public and the other is private. Public investigations occur in the context of criminal cases, usually conducted by the law enforcement officers and driven by the statutes in the criminal law. Some examples of public investigations involve drug crimes, sexual exploitation, and theft. Private investigations occur in the context of civil cases. Organizations try to avoid any form of litigations due to the enormous associated cost. As a result, many private investigations simply turn out to be internal cases. Private investigations are typically conducted by corporations or similar types of organizations. They are driven by the statutes of the civil law or organizational policies. One of the most important things to consider in private investigations is business continuity. If your investigation is hurting your business bottom line, the investigation is probably not worth it. Therefore, your priority has to be actually stopping the violations rather than litigating. Some examples of private investigations include sabotage, embezzlement, and industrial espionage. Also, the boundary between public and private investigations is not always very clear. For example, when you're investigating an employee for a potential violation of company policies and come across illegal pornography, the job quickly turns into a public case. Because of this reason, as a computer forensics investigator, you should be able to handle both public and private cases. There are many tools of the trade in computer forensics. Some of these tools are software-based, others are hardware-based. Many computer forensic software tools exist in the form of a software suite. They usually have a comprehensive set of features that cover an investigation from the beginning to its completion. Some of these features include the ability to acquire and process data, conduct searches, and generate reports. Encased by Guardian Software is one such software suite. Here is their website in case you'd like to check it out. Depending on the nature of your case, there are times you need specialized software tools other than a computer forensic software suite because sometimes they don't provide the particular feature you're looking for. For example, if you have to retrieve hidden text in an image file, a general-purpose computer forensics tool wouldn't be able to help you. For that, you need specialized software called a Steganography tool, similar to the one you're seeing here. There are also special hardware needs. Forensic software is demanding in terms of processing power, memory size, and disk space. The more of these resources you have, the better. Forensics workstations also feature extra bays and additional ports to help with quick expansions. In addition to the computer forensics workstation, you may also need some special equipment such as a write blocker, which prevents an operating system from writing over an evidence drive. There are also software write blockers out there, but a lot of times, hardware write blockers are preferred because of their simple and surefire nature. Although it's not very special, another tool you need in your computer forensics arsenal is a large capacity storage device. Evidence drives are often large capacity devices, and they are getting bigger as we speak. Regardless of our backgrounds, we all know very well that having an effective tool at hand can make a night and day difference. The same applies to computer forensics. To be effective as a computer forensics investigator, you have to have as many relevant tools as possible, and throughout this course, we'll explore many of these tools I've mentioned. There are some important legal consequences you should be aware of as a computer forensics investigator. If you conduct your computer forensics investigation improperly, all the evidence you collect could be thrown out of court. Even worse, you could get into legal trouble if you're not careful. In the context of a public investigation, one of the first things you have to consider is the Fourth Amendment. As you know, the Fourth Amendment protects you from unauthorized search and seizure. Therefore, as a computer forensics investigator, it's important that you obtain a warrant by putting together a document called an affidavit to justify your warrant. In the context of a private investigation, the Fourth Amendment is often not a major issue because your investigation is driven by internal policies rather than the statutes of the law. Employers ask their employees to give their consent to comply with these policies when a job offer is made. Whether part of a public or private case, for your evidence to be accepted by the court, you must ensure the reproducibility and verifiability of your evidence. You can accomplish this by following systematic procedures in your computer forensics investigations when you are collecting and analyzing data. For example, the use of chain of custody forms and evidence lockers are critical, especially when you're trying to make sure there is little chance of tampering. Chain of custody forms allow you to keep track of who handled your evidence, while evidence lockers are secure containers to store physical evidence. One way of ensuring verifiability is by the use of hashing. Let's say that you have data on an original storage device or evidence drive, and a hash algorithm produces value A based on that data. Then you make a copy of the drive. If the same algorithm produces hash value B out of the duplicate, and if A and B match, the validity of the copy is verified. In this course, we have a dedicated lesson where we look into hashing in more detail. If you can generate the same hash value over and over again with the same file and software tool, reproducibility is proven. The Fourth Amendment, verifiability, and reproducibility are what you should always keep in mind as a computer forensics professional. How you conduct your investigation with respect to these principles may have a significant legal impact. To avoid unintended consequences, following the best practices is essential. The good news for computer forensics professionals is that there are opportunities everywhere, and there will be even more because computer crimes are on the rise. The bad news is that criminals are getting more organized and sophisticated, which makes our job as investigators increasingly challenging. There are many anti-forensics techniques that individuals can use when committing crimes in the cyberspace. It's now a common practice to adopt one or more of these approaches to evade detection. Encryption is turning out to be a huge challenge because it scrambles evidence and renders it useless. All mainstream operating systems, or OS vendors, are providing advanced encryption capabilities for mobile devices and personal computers to protect the privacy of their customers. Users can quickly and easily turn encryption on without expert knowledge. Some of you may remember a controversy surrounding Apple not providing technical support for breaking its own encryption algorithm to help law enforcement. Advances in hardware and software are always ongoing and presenting constant challenges. The sheer volume of data they generate alone is already too daunting to keep up with. These days, many standard storage devices have capacities well over 1 terabyte. Unless we accomplish comparable advances in search tools, forensic analysis attempts are bound to take longer. Luckily, we're seeing an explosion in data science innovations, especially in the area of big data. And I'm hoping that the newly emerging data science solutions will help reduce the average turnaround time for computer forensics analysis reports. We're also storing more data in the cloud, and the ownership of data is not always clear, which could lead to custody disputes over potential evidence kept by a cloud service provider. Another welcome change would be the improvement of the ease of use of the computer forensics tools. More automation is an important aspect of this because it will enable investigators to spend less time on mundane tasks and to focus more on what's really important. Automation can also help relieve specialists of simple but critical preliminary tasks such as collecting evidence at crime scenes, which less trained law enforcement officers should be able to handle with more user-friendly software and hardware. Despite some of the challenges I mentioned here, the prospect of computer forensics industry is highly positive. There's always a big demand for well-trained professionals, and this trend will continue for the foreseeable future. If you're considering a career path in computer forensics, now is the time to jump in. Working in computer forensics is challenging, partly due to the rapidly changing technology landscape. Old and new technologies also coexist, while new software and hardware are constantly appearing. Take your PC. They continuously release new versions of the OS. Microsoft OS alone has a long list of its upgrades from MS-DOS to Windows 10. One challenge computer forensics professionals face is that they may encounter many differing technologies during an investigation. It could be MS-DOS today, but Windows 10 tomorrow. Does this mean that you need to know everything? The simple answer is no. It's virtually impossible to master every OS. A good compromise is to develop foundational knowledge that transcends OSs in general and to focus on major differences in more persistent aspects of computer technology, such as file systems. You also have to be resourceful. Sometimes all it takes is a call to an expert. However, it's still challenging to keep up with the fundamentals and maintain an understanding of all the technologies out there. Therefore, to thrive in this ever-changing field, you have to be somebody who loves learning. The second challenge is that criminals are getting smarter and developing new ways to thwart forensics analysis attempts, as we discussed. These anti-forensics techniques range from encryption to steganography. Once again, computer forensics specialists should be fully aware of these tricks and wade through the challenges to acquire the evidence they are tasked to find. The third challenge is the sheer volume of data to be analyzed. The storage capacity of a typical computer is growing exponentially. These days, it's common for a laptop to have a terabyte solid-state drive. To produce a timely report, an investigator must have access to a powerful workstation equipped with the latest forensics technologies, which are rapidly evolving themselves. There are also other non-technical challenges like legal considerations. Privacy is one of them. To stay out of trouble, a forensic specialist should be crafty, able to navigate through private data while not violating a person's privacy. Otherwise, the investigator runs the risk of having the collected evidence thrown out of the court. Jurisdiction is another legal challenge. Due to the differences in laws between countries, you may not be allowed to retrieve and present certain information. There are a number of challenges in computer forensics, which are naturally resulting in more expansion and specializations in the field. Personally, I feel that these challenges are good for the industry on the whole because they are generating more opportunities for all of us. There is an ongoing race between criminals and computer forensics professionals. The lawbreakers are always seeking ways to evade the investigators. Sometimes, bad guys get unexpected help from operating system or OS vendors. To protect the privacy of its users, OS companies strengthen their encryption, which could keep good guys from doing their work. It's a delicate balance. Encryption is one of the most daunting challenges computer forensics specialists are facing today because it prevents investigators from reading the data they need to conduct an investigation. Another obstacle is an attempt to erase evidence from various media, like a solid-state drive. Depending on how you delete your data, it's impossible to recover it. When you delete a file, your OS doesn't actually remove it from a storage device. It simply marks the area the file is occupying as deleted, so it can be overwritten later. A tech-savvy criminal can easily use a software tool to overwrite the section designated as deleted and make it permanently erased. Metadata provides information on different aspects of data. If your data is a digital photo, its metadata includes facts like when the photo was taken and which device took the photo. OSs keep metadata about files, including names, sizes, timestamps, and most importantly, where the files are stored. Corrupting or deleting the metadata will make it extremely difficult to reconstruct or find the file. Preventing metadata from being created altogether is another option. An example is suppressing the changes of timestamps every time revisions are made. This will throw off investigators because they'll be confused about the sequence of file change events. There are also more creative ways to avoid detection and hide information. One of the methods is using steganography, often favored by spies. They can embed information in a picture file subtly so that the image is not significantly altered. If done well, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between an original image and its tempered version, as you can see on the Guardian Project website, where they offer a steganography app. A more general method to hide data is to put it in unreachable places that are undetectable by computer forensics software. A slack space, which is a leftover created when you're writing to a file system, is a popular choice for this. More advanced techniques can destroy evidence once they detect an attempt to forensically analyze a digital medium. New anti-forensics techniques are always emerging, and there are many more under development as we speak. This race between defenders and violators will continue as long as there is money to be made through computer and cyber crimes. Computer forensics is an essential component in meeting compliance requirements. Depending on the industry, organizations have to comply with different rules and regulations. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, of 1996 stipulates the protection of personally identifiable information, or PII, in the healthcare and insurance industries. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, is a non-regulatory agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce. NIST SP 800-66 is a publication designed to help implement the HIPAA security rule. SP here stands for Special Publication. The NIST guide clearly specifies computer forensics requirements and regulations. In particular, it discusses establishing an audit trail that can support a forensics investigation after an incident. An audit trail is a set of chronological records that document security-relevant events. Various log messages generated by software and hardware are an example of an audit trail. If handling credit card transactions, an organization is responsible for adhering to the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI-DSS. PCI-DSS imposes annual audit reports to ensure that organizations take proper security precautions while processing customer credit card information. It mandates a process to provide a timely computer forensics investigation after a compromise occurs. The Federal Information Security Management Act, or FISMA, of 2002 requires federal organizations to generate and retain an immutable audit trail that enables a computer forensics investigation after a security incident. As you can see, computer forensics plays a crucial role in ensuring that an organization remains compliant with cybersecurity rules and regulations. This is one more reason to learn about computer forensics if you're involved in any aspects of the cybersecurity industry. Cybercrimes are increasingly affecting our lives. We routinely hear news stories about data breaches and find ourselves wondering about whether criminals stole our data or not. Cybersecurity is all about preventing and responding to cybercrimes, which requires the heavy use of computer forensics techniques. Whenever there is a security incident, such as unauthorized access to a server, it's crucial to trace back to the source of the attack and to understand how it happened. By doing this, we find out the extent of the damage and take appropriate actions. We can also prevent future attacks by making adjustments according to the lessons we learned from a thorough investigation. Since the evidence of a cybercrime is mostly present on computing devices like laptops, routers, and firewalls, a computer forensics investigation must accompany every cybersecurity action. Due to this close relationship between cybersecurity and computer forensics, professionals are paying more attention to developing additional skills specific to handling cybercrimes. An expertise required to more effectively investigate a cybercrime is knowledge in computer networking, which is the study of connecting machines using various media including radio signals, Ethernet, and fiber optics cables. As computer forensics workers were seeking more specialization in cybersecurity towards computer networking, they created an entirely new discipline called network forensics. This subfield of computer forensics focuses on violations and crimes occurring in the context of a computer network. As you can see, cybercrimes and computer forensics are now inseparable, and you need to develop at least a reasonable understanding of computer networking to play any significant role in a computer forensics investigation. As computer forensics expands itself into cyber and digital domains, specialization is essential because it's impossible for one person to know it all. Investigations in cyberspaces require expertise in computer networking because monitoring past network traffic establishes evidence after a cybercrime happens. This involves looking for traces of crime in all the possible elements of what constitutes a computer network, including computers, switches, and routers. Many computers host programs called servers that provide services to another program or remote users. Servers and the clients can both be the origins and the destinations of computer network communications and should be subject to close scrutiny. The emphasis on computer networking is why we collectively call the cybercrime-centric investigation techniques network forensics. One of the conventional subfields of computer forensics is that of operating systems or OS. The sheer number of different OSs and their versions warrant a specialty of its own. The third major specialization focuses on the World Wide Web. These days, I find myself doing a majority of my computing tasks in a web browser. I use a web client to check my emails. I edit my documents in Google Docs. I watch videos on YouTube. My Google Chrome frequently takes up more than a half of resources on my personal computer or PC. Just because of the dominance of the web and its applications in our everyday lives, unique web-specific forensics approaches are necessary and of high demand. Cloud forensics is another trend shaping our information technology adoption. The cloud now powers most of the applications we are accessing through the web. And criminals have already started exploiting cloud users, which is why cloud forensics is becoming a major digital forensics subfield. To compromise web and cloud security, criminals sponsor the development of malicious software or malware. The complexity of malware is increasing as lawbreakers understand its value and invest more resources in producing more sophisticated attack software. To effectively address malware challenges in computer forensics, expert knowledge is a must. Mobile computing devices have software and hardware characteristics fundamentally different from desktop computers. The form factors are different, so are the OSs such as iOS and Android. Tablets and mobile phones are quickly becoming mainstream, and we use less and less time on our PCs. We definitely need a specialized treatment here, and mobile forensics is a response to this need. Email forensics is the last specialization I'd like to bring up. People are spending a big portion of their professional lives checking emails, and the same also applies to criminals who exchange emails to coordinate their illegal activities. The significance of email in digital forensics is high enough to deserve a specialization. As the IT landscape changes, digital forensics must keep up with the advancement of the field. Specialization is a coping mechanism, and the discipline of digital forensics will become even more diverse. I feel lucky to be part of this dynamic industry of digital forensics. Network forensics investigates crimes in cyberspace. Its focus is on analyzing and monitoring network traffic, which is data exchanged between computing devices with unique addresses. To be able to conduct network forensics tasks, you need to develop significant knowledge in computer networking. Some of the topics to master include the roles of network hardware like switches, routers, and hosts in various network layers such as physical, data link, and application. Others are concepts A prime example is network architecture that decides how to assemble different network hardware components in a specific topology. Understanding a network architecture is equivalent to acquiring a map, which is essential for the searches you need to conduct in a maze of various network devices and appliances. Besides learning the hardware, layers, and concepts, becoming proficient with networking software is another important aspect of establishing yourself as a network forensics specialist. The most fundamental networking software is operating systems, or OSs. They provide baseline networking capabilities that turn your application data into packets and then electrical or optical signals so that they can travel through copper wires or fiber optics cables. Your OSs also allow you to configure your network settings so that you can connect your computer to a local area network or LAN. If you're not already familiar with basic commands like ipconfig on Windows or ifconfig on Linux, it's a good indicator that you are lacking qualifications as a network forensics investigator. After developing proficiency with OSs, a natural next step is to study well-known software tools. Packet sniffers are one of them. Acquiring data is a major task in digital forensics, and packet sniffers are what you use to collect and preserve data in computer networking. There are numerous software tools in computer networking: software firewall solutions, intrusion detection and prevention systems, security information and event management or SIEM applications are these, to just name a few. I hope that you have a good feel for what network forensics involves by now. There are several digital forensics software products that have built-in features for network forensics tasks and require minimum knowledge in networking. But to dig deeper into the crime scenes in the cyberspace, much more is needed. If your career goal is to become a network forensics specialist, my recommendation is that you do all of the things I've highlighted so far. Just like any field worthy of your attention, there are always endless things to learn in network forensics. Operating systems, or OSs, are one of the most fundamental components of digital forensics. This is because we use OSs to control all the digital devices around us. Take your mobile phones. The prevalent OSs that drive the inner workings of them are Android and iOS. Your favorite digital watches have their own OSs. Windows, Linux, and Mac OS power most of the computers in the world. Their diversity alone presents a huge challenge. Each type of hardware can potentially have its own OS, like your phone, watch, and computer. Windows has so many versions, and you cannot simply ignore its older versions because many of them are still in use. I bet Windows 3.1 is still in use somewhere out there. A more realistic scenario is investigators running into outdated OSs such as Windows 98 rather than its prehistoric predecessor. The die-hard nature of OSs, along with their diversity, makes them even tougher to investigate and demands specialization. One of the major areas of OS forensics is file systems because they store data, including evidence. Although similar, each operating system has its own unique way of storing files. This is even the case among different versions of the same OS like Windows. Have you heard of FAT or NTFS? FAT stands for File Allocation Table, and NTFS is an acronym for New Technology File System. Both of them are popular Windows file management systems. Linux and Mac OS have their own. Random access memory, or RAM, is another location where an investigator can find a significant amount of data leading to potentially incriminating evidence. Over the years, the capacity of RAM has been increasing, and personal computers, or PCs, often have 8 gigabytes of memory or more. You can find lots of useful data in RAM, including unencrypted encryption keys and passwords. The challenge is that the data in RAM is volatile, which means you lose its content when your computer is turned off. Because of this, it's critical that you capture the data while the suspect computer is still on. We call this act of retrieving data from RAM live acquisition. OSs also generate numerous log files with crucial information like timestamps and identities. Other areas of OS forensics include virtualization and cloud computing. Many corporations no longer have their own server room, but outsource their IT to cloud service providers, which use virtual machines to install end-user OSs instead of physical PCs. What I've discussed so far is just a highlight of the fascinating field of OS forensics. You at least need a decent level of competency in OS forensics to qualify as a digital forensics professional because the knowledge is foundational for almost all digital forensics tasks. Web browsers are a huge part of how we use our computing devices these days. We check our emails through web applications like Gmail. We shop online using our web browsers. Online banking is another major area where we use web applications. We use web browsers on multiple platforms. They are available on our phones, tablets, and computers. We can also sync multiple instances of web browsers by signing on, which makes web forensics even more relevant. Due to our heavy uses of web browsers in our computing experiences and on the internet, web forensics has become a major subfield of digital forensics. One of the goals here is to find sensitive information such as usernames and passwords. Password management has been a major challenge in cybersecurity, and web browsers are trying to help mitigate the problem by giving users an option to save their credentials in the cloud. Therefore, full access to a web browser account can unlock many other online accounts a suspect owns. The same applies to credit card numbers because they are stored as well. Browsing history is another treasure trove of information. Based on the sites visited by a user, investigators can tell a lot about the person, including motives and criminal intent. A lot of what we do when we're surfing the web is also searches, and the query terms often provides clues to the mindset of a suspect. Although ultimately encrypted to be saved in the cloud, the confidential information, documents, images, videos, data entered into forms, scripts, and executable files linger in a temporary and less secure memory location called cache. Basically, examining web data alone can reveal tons of information on a user, including interests, preferences, beliefs, shopping habits, friends, family, and other social networks. Because of the widespread use and the information-rich environment it provides, cybercriminals frequently launch their attacks against web browsers. If you work in IT, you must have heard of cross-site scripting and SQL injection by now. Since these attacks occur through web browsers, cybersecurity professionals can conduct a web forensics investigation as their way of fulfilling an incident response task. The dominance and popularity of web browsers in everyday computing also presents some challenges. An obvious one is their diversity. There are several mainstream web browsers, and they continue to evolve. Encryption and privacy features are others. By using an incognito mode, users can conceal their browsing history. Despite these difficulties, web browsers are still a major source of evidence for digital forensics. I hope you're intrigued and ready to learn more about them. Web forensics certainly deserves scrutiny in its own right. Cloud computing used to be an emerging technology, but not anymore. It's quickly taken over many aspects of our computing lives. Take file storage. Many of us now have one or more cloud drive service accounts. I frequently use Dropbox, Box, Microsoft OneDrive, and Google Drive. I rarely store data locally. What this implies is that digital forensics is not limited to local file systems anymore, but must expand its scope to include cloud service products. There are three major types of cloud services. Software as a Service, or SaaS, is what we are most familiar with because of its consumer-facing nature. It offers software solutions in the form of web applications like word processors and spreadsheets. Platform as a Service, or PaaS, allows a self-contained environment in which users can develop and maintain their own software services. Web servers, databases, operating systems are frequently available as part of PaaS offerings. Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS, is the most extensive form of cloud computing option and allows users to build their own computing resources by providing virtual hardware. Through IaaS, you can provide your own virtual machines, virtual switches, and virtual routers, to just name a few. What's daunting to digital forensics investigators is that criminals have access to all these different forms of cloud capabilities. Due to prevalence of cloud computing, the bad guys have a much easier time to quickly set up a computing infrastructure to commit a crime and destroy it to evade detection, all on somebody else's hardware. What's important here is the actions of cloud service providers to monitor these criminal activities. By now, we all know very well that social media sites like Facebook and YouTube could become the prime targets of criminal investigations and hold important evidence. If these companies don't cooperate in terms of capturing and detecting illegal activities on their service platforms, investigators will have very little to work with. Think about the possibility of having to execute a search warrant for an entire data center. There is no way you can do your job effectively without the help of the people managing the facility. This is why rules and regulations are critical in cloud forensics. Without a mandate to help lawful investigations, cloud service providers have little incentive to do anything. In several cases, all you can rely on is basic mechanisms such as service level agreements or SLAs. Another option is Federal Rules of Civil Procedures, or FRCP. Other than these, there doesn't seem to be too much available to help cloud forensics investigations. Negotiations and legal knowledge play an important role here, in addition to technical skills. Malware is short for malicious software. Cybercriminals frequently use malware to commit crimes. Computer viruses used to be a majority of malware we encountered, which is no longer the case. Malware has evolved since its first appearance. There are now many different types of malware, including viruses, worms, adware, Trojan horse, rootkit, and ransomware. Viruses need human assistance like opening a file, while worms can spread on their own through network connections. Adware is less damaging compared to other forms of malware that destroys information because its goal is to display advertisements. It's annoying, but better than losing access to data. Trojan horses are what appears to be benign and useful on the surface, but the software performs thefts and inflicts damage behind the scene. Rootkit changes your operating system altogether to hide any suspicious activities. Changes are only visible to installers of the rootkit. Victims cannot detect anything unusual. Ransomware seems to be very active these days. I'm sure you hear about it. They lock your computer and prevent you from using it. Recently, many organizations have been the victims of ransomware attacks, as shown on this Wired website. Criminals would ask for ransom money in return for unlocking your computer, hence the name ransomware. Much of malware forensics involves capturing and analyzing the software tools used for crimes to understand the scope of damage and to find ways to detect and disable them. One of the most popular tools used to do this is Disassembler, which allows an investigator to extract source code out of an executable file. Having access to source code is like obtaining a treasure map. The source code shows the logic behind malware behavior and shed light on its evasion techniques. Disassemblers are now available even in the form of software as a service, as shown here on the online disassembler.com. Another important tool is live acquisition. You want to catch malware red-handed while it's in action. And the best place to do this is the main memory of your computer, in which the malware resides and is taking actions. After lifting the memory resident binary data, that's simply a combination of zeros and ones, you can use your disassembler of your choice to dissect the malware you just captured. One of the first steps of malware forensics is to detect the presence of malware. A conventional way to do this is fingerprinting, which looks for a static pattern. The assumption here is that the pattern is not changing, which is why we use the term static. Malware is getting smarter and uses various tactics to avoid detection through static analysis, which is why we now need a new approach called dynamic analysis. Observing damaging and deceptive behaviors is crucial in dynamic analysis. Because of the heavy emphasis on examining software, coding knowledge is crucial in becoming an expert in malware forensics. Mobile computing devices are everywhere. Mobile phones are quickly replacing personal computers in their popularity and functions. It's now a common practice to confiscate mobile phones and tablets in a criminal investigation. Mobile forensics is a subfield of digital forensics which focuses on finding evidence on mobile devices. The diversity of mobile devices is overwhelming. I've already gone through dozens of cell phones and tablets since my first purchase. We've seen many technologies come and go as part of the mobile revolution in our modern world. USB is a good example. I have so many cables at home to connect devices using different USB standards like USB 2.0, USB 3.0, Apple Lightning, and USB 3.1 Type-C connectors. The list goes on and on. Finding appropriate cables alone could be a huge challenge for a forensics investigator. This highlights the importance of tool support for cases involving mobile devices. If a vendor can provide a universal kit with all the necessary hardware to get the data we need out of the proprietary hardware, the investigator's job will be much easier. Therefore, mobile forensics investigators must be proficient with specialized hardware and software tools to do their jobs effectively, because having the right equipment or program can make a big difference. Luckily, there are a number of forensic solutions companies specializing in mobile devices. To be competitive, their aim is to cover as many technologies as possible, which include various versions of mobile operating systems and different generations of hardware by numerous vendors. Although similar, there are hardware components unique to mobile devices, such as Subscriber Identifier Module or SIM. At a crime scene, it's also important to seize all associated cables and media like a secure digital or SD memory card. There are also specific types of data essential to acquire from mobile devices. These include phone book, calendar, to-do list, text messages, subscriber identifier, call history, location information, and Wi-Fi network and cell towers used. Due to the diverse nature of mobile devices, it's often necessary to resort to multiple software and hardware tools. Mobile devices require custom seizure and preservation methods. All these distinct characteristics of mobile device forensics demand special education and training and justify a recognition as a major track within digital forensics. Emails are how we conduct our business today. They are also our main means to reach out to people. Criminals know that we pay attention to email, and they try to take advantage of our increasing dependence on email in personal and business lives. Take phishing that tries to lure you into visiting a fake website and giving up sensitive information like your social security number or SSN. Emails are its primary attack vector or mechanism. Phishing is a form of social engineering which takes advantage of human mistakes in an overall cybersecurity context. Phishing emails can be as simple as someone impersonating your boss and asking for confidential information. Emails can also deliver malware in their attachments. Simply opening an attachment file can infect your computer. Since emails are so prevalent during our daily communications, the electronic conversations alone can serve as incriminating evidence. Emails provide credible documentation of how various criminal activities unfolded in an organization in many of corporate fraud cases and white-collar crimes such as the Enron scandal. One of the major tasks of an email forensics specialist is to find out the true identities of the sender and the receivers of an email and validate the authenticity of a message. We can use metadata to do this. Assuming that our data is email, its metadata are IP addresses, timestamps, headers, email client used, etc. Timestamps establish the sequence of criminal activities, while IP addresses can pinpoint where emails originated. Other significant email data include their multimedia content, such as web links, pictures, videos, and audio files. Another major email forensics task is keyword searches. The goal here is finding emails relevant to the crime you're investigating. Tool support is essential in making the search process efficient. To retrieve emails and prepare them for an in-depth analysis, it's necessary to know how to work with different email clients. There are characteristics unique to each client and how they save their emails on local or remote file systems. An effective investigator needs to be fully aware of these details. Typical emails go through multiple servers to get to their destinations. To make this delivery process happen, email clients and servers use a protocol called Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. Because it's so easy to fabricate an email, it's frequently necessary to examine the logs of the email servers to check its validity. Therefore, email forensics investigation requires you to understand the server side of the SMTP too. Since email systems rely heavily on computer networks and their software applications, including clients and servers, it doesn't hurt to develop knowledge in computer networking either. Although we treat it as an independent subfield of digital forensics, email forensics is closely related to network forensics and malware forensics. I would go so far as to say that it's a further specialization of network forensics. Obtaining a certification is a good way to increase your credibility as a digital forensics investigator. There are mainly two different types of certifications out there. One is those provided by tool vendors, such as guidance software or access data. The other is provided by professional associations, such as EC Council or International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists, or IACIS. We'll look into each certification in more detail, one by one. Let's look at EnCase first. It requires 64 hours authorized computer forensics training or 12 months of computer forensics experience. This certification, provided by the guidance software, is called EnCase Certified Examiner, or ENCE. Next is the certification provided by Access Data. The requirements for this certification include familiarity with Forensics Toolkit, or FTK. To obtain the certification, you must have a fully licensed copy of FTK. As you can see, a lot of times these vendor-provided certifications are tied to the products the vendors are selling. The certification provided by Access Data is called Access Data Certified Examiner, or ACE. Next is the certification provided by EC Council. This one is vendor neutral and open to the public. The name of the certification is Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator, or CHFI. Finally, there is a certification provided by an organization called IACIS. In this case, the certification is more geared towards the law enforcement officers or government employees. The name of the certification is Certified Forensic Computer Examiner, or CFCE. If you decide to become a career computer forensics investigator, it's not a bad idea to obtain one of these computer forensics certifications. There are some prerequisites to starting a digital forensics investigation. These include basic hardware and software tools, which require significant investments. Maintenance is an important aspect to consider. Hardware needs replacing every once in a while. Software also demands upgrading because new versions are coming out constantly. Managers shouldn't forget the fact that time is also money. Free software sounds good initially, but it could become a time sink when there is little professional support available to help a team to configure an application properly. It may well be the case that the software becomes obsolete once its development stops due to some obscure problems associated with the project. If this happens, you lose all your investments into the software. For one, your expertise in the software product becomes useless because you have to abandon it and find its replacement. This is why it's important to always consider the total cost of ownership, or TCO, when it comes to owning hardware and software. Think about all the resources being allocated during the entire lifespan of a solution when you're making your important purchasing decisions. Compared to software and hardware, your investments into training and education are relatively safer bets as long as you make sound choices in what to learn. Learning fundamentals like number systems stay with you for your entire career, although updating and upgrading your knowledge are paramount to stay relative as a digital forensics professional. This is why I'm covering classic concepts like hexadecimal numbers and offset. I call them classic because they will never become obsolete. There are some hardware tools you need as a digital forensics investigator to function effectively. One of the essential requirements for digital forensics hardware is efficiency, mainly in terms of speed. As a digital forensics investigator, you spend a lot of your time on mundane things such as waiting for your imaging process to be over and looking for information. Depending on how fast your computer is, you can finish these tasks very quickly. Therefore, the speed of your digital forensics hardware is critical. Another requirement for your digital forensics hardware is capacity. Your digital forensics hardware demands more memory and storage, as well as extra bays or slots. The third requirement is compatibility. In your investigations, you'll be coming across many different types of operating systems or software applications. There are also various kinds of hardware you'll have to deal with. The next requirement is mobility or portability. When you show up at a crime scene, there are some initial digital forensics tasks you have to accomplish, which is why some of the digital forensics hardware you need has to be more portable. When in a lab environment, you have access to a full-blown digital forensics workstation. However, at a crime scene, you need a scaled-down version of the same hardware, especially in the form of a field kit. One of the major elements of the field kit is a laptop configured as a digital forensics workstation. There are also some miscellaneous digital forensics hardware like flashlights, anti-static evidence bags, cameras, chain of custody forms, cables, and screwdrivers. Anti-static evidence bags are particularly important when handling sensitive electronics. Touching them with your bare hands can cause a short circuit, which makes the evidence useless. Using an anti-static evidence bag prevents this from happening. There is a wide variety of specialized digital forensics hardware. What we've discussed so far is a good place to start learning more about them. A huge part of becoming an effective digital forensics investigator is to be familiar with all the major computer forensics software. There are well-known commercial digital forensics software tools out there, such as Encase and Forensics Toolkit, or FTK. There are also open source and free digital forensics software. These include Autopsy and Sans Investigative Forensic Toolkit, or SIFT. We can also categorize the digital forensics software products based on the comprehensiveness of the features they provide. When an application provides all or most of the features necessary for you to conduct a digital forensics investigation, we call it a digital forensics software suite. Software tools such as Encase FTK, and Autopsy fall under this category. There are also computer forensics utilities that focus only on a single aspect of digital forensics investigations. For example, FTK Imager solely focuses on obtaining an image of an evidence drive. Tools such as Dcfldd or DD also provide similar features. Hex editors allow you to examine your file at a binary level. What's really handy is packaging open source and free forensics programs into a Linux operating system distribution. This way, you don't have to install anything and start using them out of box. The Digital Forensics OS distributions also offer an isolated environment, which is important to prevent tampering. You can install them on a physical machine or virtual machine. My hope is that by the time you're done with this course, you'll have at least a basic understanding of how we use these software solutions in a digital forensics context. The knowledge of hexadecimal numbers is essential in the toolbox of a digital forensics investigator. One of the motivations for using hexadecimal numbers is that it's often necessary to investigate data at a binary level. We use binary numbers to represent everything on a computing device. Binary numbers rely on only two symbols, 0 and 1. Machine code is strings consisting of zeros and ones. It's the only language your computer speaks. Criminals frequently hide or fabricate their data at the machine code level. Therefore, as a digital forensics investigator, you should also be able to examine your evidence in its native format, that is, combinations of zeros and ones. Now, the challenge associated with reading machine code is that there are simply too many digits to deal with. A more compact way to represent binary numbers makes human inspection much easier. The way you represent your data in machine code is called encoding. For example, to encode A, we need 8 binary digits, 0100, 0001. As you can see, displaying the raw binary data takes up a lot of space. Detecting a pattern is also more difficult because of their similarities. Hexadecimal representation, on the other hand, is much more compact and easier to examine, which increases readability and facilitates spotting a specific pattern. Another reason we use hexadecimal numbers to represent binary numbers is the ease of conversion. I told you that letter A requires 8 binary digits to encode, as shown here. In hexadecimal, we just need 2 digits to represent the same number, which are 4 and 1. Think about the difference between 0100, 0001 versus 41. Which one do you think is easier to manage? Each binary digit is referred to as a bit. 1 byte consists of 8 bits. Usually, 1 byte is all it takes to represent a character in an alphabet. The hexadecimal number system uses base 16, which means that it uses 16 different symbols, 0 through 9 and A through F, to represent the magnitudes, such as 10 through 15. Each hexadecimal digit is capable of representing 4 binary digits. 1111 is the biggest binary number you can represent with 1 hexadecimal digit, which is F. The knowledge of hexadecimal number system will help you in your future digital forensics investigations because you are bound to handle it in your hex editors. Many digital forensics tools also present data to their end users in hexadecimal numbers. Your computer stores everything in binary, or, in other words, zeros and ones. Criminals modify these binary numbers and fabricate them to hide their data, and you need hex editors to find this hidden data. Hex in the term hex editors is short for hexadecimal. As its name suggests, hex editors allow us to examine and play with data at the binary level. There are many hex editors available, some of which are free and open source. Others are commercial products. Hex Workshop is one of the paid software programs. Compared to their competitors that are free, proprietary hex editors like Hex Workshop are more advanced and feature-rich. There are some essential hex editor features you need as a digital forensics investigator. These include abilities to open big files or local drives. A lot of times, what happens is you have to open an entire drive in a hex editor, and for some reason, your hex editor crashes because it cannot handle the size of the file or the drive, which is definitely problematic. You also need abilities to make and write changes to reveal secrets. Another important feature is an effective means to conduct searches, especially by sectors, which are the smallest physical storage unit of a data drive. It's sometimes necessary to shift bits to find hidden information. Almost all the hex editors come with the ability to obtain hash values, which are unique strings representing files. Getting a hash value using a hex editor is simple and fast. One of the things you encounter while using a hex editor is the distinction between physical and logical drives. Physical drives refer to hard drives, USB drives, or solid-state drives. These are the tangible hardware components connected to your computer. Logical drives refer to the partitions of a physical drive, which your operating system creates to allow end users to manage their data storage more effectively. Because of this, a single physical drive can show up as multiple logical drives on an operating system. Although obvious to experienced users, another thing for beginners to remember is how data is represented in your hex editor. Your data appears in hex numbers, which display binary numbers in a more compact way. A hex editor denotes the location of a particular piece of information in a file or a drive by showing how many multiples of spaces away a particular piece of data is from the beginning of a file or a sector. This concept is called offset. This is what it looks like when you open a text file in Hex Workshop. You see the hex number representation of characters here. The original text is displayed here, and this is what an offset value looks like. How do you feel about this initial tour of a hex editor environment? Hopefully, you are ready and motivated to do some basic investigations using a hex editor by now. We occasionally see or hear the term offset in the digital forensics literature or talks. You may have wondered what offset means. Your understanding of the concept of offset is critical in analyzing and interpreting your data in digital forensics, not to mention following a lecture or an article. Offset is significant, especially in the context of locating a piece of information in your dataset. Simply put, offset is a way to refer to a location from a particular reference point, either the beginning of a file, the beginning of a sector, or the beginning of an entire drive, by specifying their distance in bytes. Basically, that's it. That's the whole idea behind offset. To do this, we use hex numbers to record the number of bytes between a reference point and a location of our interest. By the way, hex here is short for hexadecimal. Let's say the offset is 10 in hex, which means the current location of a piece of data is 16 bytes away from a reference point. We use a particular offset notation to make it clear that it's a hex number as shown here. The prefix 0 and lowercase x denote that the offset amount is in hex. Here, 0x10 means the offset amount is 10 in hex. The subscript 16 is there to indicate that we are using base 16. Now, with this newly gained knowledge of offset, you can locate any piece of information in a file or drive. Before you feel more comfortable, you need lots of practice. It's crucial that you try this on your own, using tools like Hex Workshop. We talked about forensics, Linux operating systems, or OS, distributions. Let's check them out. Because its source code is freely available to the public, Linux is a great platform to leverage if you want to create a custom OS. All you have to do is to pick and choose the components you want and to add your own flavor to the graphical user interface, or GUI. We call these custom-built OSs distributions. Here is a website called distrowatch.com that follows the rankings of all the known Linux OS distributions. As you can see, there are so many out there. Kali is one of the Linux OS distributions that specialize in digital forensics. It comes with open source and free digital forensics suites such as Autopsy. Let's see if we can find it. Go to Applications, choose Forensics. It's the first item on the list. What about digital forensics utilities like Dcfldd? It's under Digital Forensics. Click on Forensics again, and you'll find Digital Forensics, and Dcfldd is right here. SANS Investigative Forensic Toolkit, or SIFT, is another forensic distribution worth your attention. This is what the SIFT environment looks like. Do you see all the cheat sheets on the desktop? They should be handy when you can't remember a command or its options. Gparted is a Linux OS distribution dedicated to managing disk partitions. It's a GUI version of Fdisk and a favorite tool for many digital forensics practitioners. Let's take a look. All this distribution contains is the Gparted tool, except for some bare essentials such as screenshot, terminal, and web browser programs. I'm about to create two new partitions here, /dev/sda1 and dev/sda2. On Linux, we represent storage devices as files. A physical serial ATA or SATA drive shows up as dev/sda as shown here. If I had a second physical drive, it would appear as dev/sdb, as in baby. The numbers after the drive letters, like SDA and SDB, refer to partitions. Therefore, dev/sda1 is the first partition of dev/sda, while dev/sda2 is the second partition. To create these partitions, all I have to do is to click on the Apply button here. I'm always amazed at how many free resources are available at our fingertips out there. Do you now have a good sense of what you can take advantage of? There's a lot to learn because each tool has rich features of its own. Understanding how an operating system, or OS, stores files is critical in computer forensics because criminals use this knowledge to hide information. File systems determine how an OS stores data on a storage device. One of the most widely used Windows file systems today is File Allocation Table, or FAT. There's a newer Windows file system called New Technology File System, or NTFS. The main difference between FAT and NTFS is the file structure database used to store file metadata and to keep track of the location of the file data. FAT uses File Allocation Table as a file structure database, while NTFS uses Master File Table, or MFT. Let's go over some terminology here before we go any further. In the context of file systems, metadata refers to the data about files. For example, data such as file name, timestamps, and other file attributes could be considered as metadata. File data is the actual data stored in a file. It's also important to know the difference between sectors and clusters. Each sector contains 512 bytes of data. Newer hard drives use 4096 byte sectors. Clusters are the smallest logical unit of file storage. They consist of one or more sectors. Knowing the distinction between logical and physical file storage units is crucial too. Logical file storage unit is what is recognized by an operating system. Clusters are logical units. Physical file storage unit is what is recognized by a storage device. Sectors are physical units. Therefore, we know that your physical storage device deals with sectors, while your OS handles logical storage units, namely clusters. Your operating system stores a file at the cluster level because the files are stored in clusters. This is what causes a wasted space problem. Let's say that you have a file whose size is 2050 bytes. Also assume that a cluster consists of two sectors. As you can see in this diagram, your file whose size is 2050 bytes cannot fit in two clusters. The file requires 3 clusters to be stored. Next time your operating system starts writing a new file, it starts after the 3rd cluster. Because of this, there is this unused space in cluster number 3, as you can see in blue, and this unused wasted space is called a slack. When it comes to efficiency, NTFS is more efficient because it uses a smaller cluster size compared to FAT, which means it reduces the amount of slack spaces, resulting in less wasted spaces. The latest Windows file system is Resilient File System, or REFS. It builds on the success of its predecessors and is an attempt to address the newly emerging challenges file systems are facing. REFS aims at making the Windows file system more compatible, available, and scalable. However, REFS has its own shortcomings and is not a replacement for NTFS yet. Have you noticed that we only focused on Windows file systems in this lesson? Linux and Mac OS file systems are entirely new topics. Of course, there are also many more things to learn about Windows. Well, we just scratched the surface. Are you ready for more? Understanding the concept of boot sequence as a computer forensics investigator is mandatory because you often have to modify it to protect the integrity of your evidence. Some of the boot sequence related hardware include Cmos and Bios. Cmos is a volatile memory chip containing time and date information as well as other configuration information. Cmos stands for Complementary Metal Oxide Semiconductor. It's a computer chip on a motherboard. BIOS stores a program that loads hardware drivers. It also loads an operating system. Before your operating system is loaded into the main memory, you have to make the memory hardware operational, which is done by loading the driver for the memory. BIOS stands for Basic Input-Output System. The BIOS hardware is now being replaced by a new alternative, which is called Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, or UEFI. One of the things your BIOS checks when your computer starts is the boot sequence. The boot sequence information is stored in your Cmos, and the boot sequence setting decides which drive to access to read operating system code. This is significant to computer forensics, especially because we're always trying to avoid changing the evidence drive accidentally. As soon as your operating system has access to your evidence drive, it could attempt to write to it and therefore compromise your evidence. The best practice is to boot from a drive containing a specialized operating system with pre-installed computer forensics programs. We can create a USB stick containing a forensic distribution of a Linux operating system. All you have to do is to plug the USB drive into your computer, which will provide an operating system for the machine you are investigating and not touch anything on your evidence drive. This is just one example of how to leverage your boot sequence for computer forensics investigation. There are also many other uses. By learning more about them, you will enhance your chance of a successful investigation. Hard disk drives provide a relatively cheap way of storing data. As a computer forensics specialist, you often have to recover data from hard disk drives, and therefore, it's essential to understand how they work to do your job effectively. Let's get started by learning some terminology. There are multiple disks inside your hard disk drive. Those are called platters. On both sides of the platters, you have read-write heads. That's one read-write head on each side. A platter is divided into tracks and sectors for addressing purposes. As you can see in this picture, tracks are concentric circular patterns on which data is written. Sectors are evenly divided sections of a track, which typically holds 512 or 4096 bytes of data. The reason why your platter is divided into tracks and sectors is that they allow you to locate a piece of information, which is important. Based on the track number and the sector numbers, you'll know exactly where the data is stored, and that information is stored in a database so that when there's a need to locate that piece of information, you can always come back to the same location. A cylinder is a collection of tracks at the same location on multiple platters, as you can see in this diagram. The total capacity of a hard disk drive can be decided by the number of cylinders, sectors, and heads. If you have 1,000 cylinders, 32 sectors, and 100 heads, the total capacity of the hard disk drive can be computed by multiplying all these three numbers. We assume that each sector consists of 512 bytes. That's why we multiply 512 at the end of the process. As a result, in this case, you have 1.6 gigabyte of capacity based on the number of cylinders, sectors, and heads. Once your BIOS selects a disk drive to boot from, the master boot record, or MBR, on your disk is then accessed. The physical drive you're booting from contains the MBR, and it keeps track of information on partitions on a storage device such as locations of your partition, the sizes of your partition, and the boot level status of your partition, because at least one of your partitions has to be set up as bootable so that your computer can boot. The disk you're booting from can also contain a piece of software called Bootloader. The Bootloader is the program that displays the menu screen you see when you start your computer, and it typically gives you options for different operating systems. For example, it could display a message that allows you to select either Windows 10 or Linux operating system. Your MBR is located in the first sector of a storage device. There are some software solutions you should be aware of regarding MBR. One of the software you can use to edit your MBR is called Fdisk. Your MBR is located in the first sector of storage device. There are some software solutions we've already seen, such as Fdisk and its graphical user interface version called Gparted. You can use them to edit your MBR. Grub is an example of a bootloader, which is typically installed by your Linux operating system. Partitioning creates an illusion to an operating system and makes a single physical storage device show up as multiple logical drives. For example, a physical hard drive can be partitioned into two partitions, one for the operating system and applications, and the other for data. By separating the data from the OS and applications, if it's necessary to reinstall the OS and applications, the data is not affected. In general, partitioning allows for more efficient and organized storage device management. Another very prominent use of partitioning is to make it possible to install multiple OSs on a single physical drive. This way, one can have multiple OS options during a boot process and choose to boot into a particular OS. A typical setup for this is a multi-boot system that allows you to boot into either Windows or Linux OSs on the same computer. There are two types of partitions, primary and extended. There could be up to 4 primary partitions. However, you can overcome this limit by making one of the primary partitions as an extended partition. The extended partition can have an unlimited number of logical partitions in it, although the number of partitions depends on the size of the extended partition. Windows OSs can be only installed on primary partitions, while Linux OSs can be installed on a logical partition too. Fdisk is a tool that allows a user to partition a storage device. It can display the current partitions, add a new partition, and remove an existing partition. Gparted is a graphical user interface or GUI front-end for Fdisk, which provides easier and more intuitive way to use the Fdisk features. We'll look at Fdisk and Gparted more closely. The first task to be conducted at a computer crime scene is to preserve evidence. The data you collect there could be all you have in solving a criminal case or policy violation, which is why you should be extremely careful to capture everything possible. While in a hurry to collect evidence, it's entirely possible to make some significant mistakes like accidentally adding, deleting, or modifying data. The consequences are grave because the court may not accept the compromised digital evidence you submit. This is why we have to do our best to keep our evidence as pristine as possible, which is the primary goal of data preservation in digital forensics. Luckily, we have well-established and concrete ways to preserve data. The first option is to use write blockers when copying data from a source, which could be a hard drive in your computer, USB drive, or an external data storage device. As their name suggests, write blockers prevent writing to an evidence drive. After deploying your favorite write blocker, but before starting to make a copy of a data storage medium, the best practice is to get a hash value. What this does is to generate a unique string that represents a specific dataset, like a partition. Once you get a copy of the partition, you can produce another hash value. If the hash values don't match, the source and its copy are not identical. Mounting and unmounting drives are also relevant to data preservation, especially in Linux and Unix operating systems. Mounting is a mechanism an operating system or OS uses to make a drive or partition visible. If the OS doesn't recognize a data source, it cannot do anything to it, which is why we always want to begin with a drive unmounted before starting our forensic work. With the data preservation techniques such as write blockers, hashing, and unmounting, there is much less chance for mishaps. They also assure that your evidence collection process is sound and valid. In computer forensics, preserving data integrity or preserving data itself is one of our top priorities. In this lesson, we'll be exploring the role of write blockers in preserving data integrity in computer forensics situations. Computer forensics rule number 1 is to not damage your evidence. In this case, the evidence refers to your evidence drive. The risk you're always running into is your operating system writing to your evidence drive. One of the countermeasures to keep this from happening is using a write blocker. There are primarily 2 different types of write blockers. The first type is hardware write blockers. Usually, these devices sit between an evidence drive and a forensic workstation. The second type is a software write blocker, and sometimes it's built into a computer forensics suite, like in CASE or FTK. You could also accomplish the same write blocking effect by changing the configuration of your operating system. This is what a hardware write blocker looks like. In addition to write blocking, there are also some other factors to consider to protect the viability of your evidence. Physical security or chain of custody is one of them. By taking care of it, you know who had access to the physical evidence drive, when and why. You can record all this information in a chain of custody form. Let's say that the process of making an image of an evidence drive, including the use of a write blocker, went flawlessly. If your evidence drive still turns out to be compromised, now you know that it happened through unauthorized physical access. This is why we'll provide you with plenty of opportunities to use various types of write blockers, as well as other means of securing and ensuring the integrity of your evidence drive. Let's enable write blocking on Windows 10 so that the operating system is not able to write to a USB drive connected to a computer. To enable write blocking, we have to run a program called regedit or registry editor. To run this program, press Windows key and R together. Just type regedit. Click on OK. Now you see the registry editor window. Choose HKey_local_machine. Click on the greater than sign next to the hkey_local_machine folder. Choose System. Click on the greater than sign again. Next, choose Current Control Set. Click on the greater than sign again. Select Control. Do a right click and choose New and select Key. Changing a registry setting on your computer could be dangerous. If you decide to follow what I'm doing, do it at your own risk. But be very careful. Now, type in Storage Device Policies in the box. And then do a right click on the folder, choose New, and then choose DWORD 32-bit value. Even if you're running a 64-bit OS, make sure that you still choose 32-bit option. Now, type in Write Protect. Press Enter. Do another right click, choose Modify, and change the value data to 1. What this does is enabling the write blocking feature. A lot of times in computer science, 1 means true while 0 means false. In this case, the write blocking option is set to true, and therefore you're enabling write blocking. Now, click on OK. Now, let's restart the machine, and we'll pick back up once the machine is restarted. The machine has been rebooted. Let's see our write blocking in action. We'll create a new folder on the desktop. Let's name it Test. Open the Windows Explorer. Resize it. Click on this PC. And you see the USB drive. And then we'll try to drag and drop the new folder onto our USB drive. And you'll get this message saying the disk is write protected. So the write blocking option is now enabled and working very well. This software-based write blocking option is probably the cheapest way of accomplishing write blocking. You don't really need any special software. If your operating system doesn't support this type of write blocking option, you will need to have a special type of software program to enable write blocking. For more serious forensics tasks, you will need hardware write blockers. Hardware write blockers come in many different forms. Let's look at some popular solutions. The most basic solution, or poor man's version, is to simply connect an evidence drive through a USB interface. Here, you rely on software for write blocking. In this case, all the hardware does is simply providing a physical interface between your evidence drive and your computer forensics workstation. Take a look at this picture. You can see that there is a USB cable connected to the forensics workstation and a SATA cable to the evidence drive. A slightly more advanced solution is a hard drive docking station. The biggest advantage here is the cleaner form factor. There are less cables to mess with. But the docking station approach also requires software to do the actual write blocking. Professionals deserve more sophisticated solutions. The primary goal here is to physically block writing and avoid accidents to comply with legal standards and requirements. Let's say that you're conducting an investigation and in the middle of it, something goes wrong with your hardware write blocker, and that's the last thing you want. These professional-grade hardware write blockers are more expensive, but they provide ironclad operations. There are some well-known manufacturers of hardware write blockers, such as VBTech by CRU. This company is a manufacturer of many other types of computer forensics equipment too. One of the main features of VBTech write blockers is more interface options. This particular product featured here provides FireWire, USB 3.0, external serial ATA, etc. It also comes with more convenient features like switches and digital displays. The most advanced hardware write blocking option is hard drive duplicators. They're fast and they're mostly plug and play. All you have to do is plug in your hard drive and then the rest will be taken care of by the duplicator. Therefore, it provides a mostly automated solution. When you're trying to buy a hardware write blocker, the purchasing decision has to be based on the purpose and the nature of your investigation. You don't always need the most expensive equipment out there. Here, the key is that you're making an informed decision. Hashing plays an important role in computer forensics. It ensures that a copy of data you're making is remaining identical to its source. Hashing refers to the process of transforming an input, which is usually a file, into an output, which is a unique string associated with that file. There are some important characteristics about hashing. Any slight changes you're making in a file will get amplified in huge changes in its hash value. This makes it very easy to detect changes made to a file either by accident or on purpose. Hashing ensures data integrity, which means that no unintended changes are made in the data. In the context of computer forensics, this means that evidence drive remains the same during your investigation. That is, a forensic image or copy of the evidence drive stays the same. Therefore, hashing is an essential part of your computer forensics investigation. Any non-trivial computer forensics tools should come equipped with an ability to produce hash values. Now, we'll do a quick demo of hashing on a Linux operating system. First, let's create a text file called test.txt by typing nano test.txt. Notice that there is a space between nano and the file name, test.txt. Nano is one of the text editors you can use on a Linux operating system. Now press Enter and type a sentence. Now to save this file, simply press Ctrl and X together and then type Y to save the file. Since you're going to be accepting the file name as test.txt, all we have to do is press Enter here. Now, the next step is to use one of the built-in hash algorithms of your Linux operating system, which is called Md5 Sum. Type Md5 Sum, and then the name of the file, which is test.txt, and press Enter. You see the hash value of the file, test.txt, right here. Now let's make some changes in the original file, test.txt. To edit the file again, type nano test.txt. This time, we'll just add one word, not. So the sentence now reads as, this is not a test. Now save the file by pressing Ctrl and X key together again. Type Y Accept the file name as is and press enter. Now we'll run the hash algorithm again by typing Md5 Sum space test.txt. This time, just use an up arrow key to recall your command, Md5 Sum space test.txt, and press enter. You can see the two hash values generated side by side, and you can also see that they are radically different because you made a change in the file test.txt. What if you changed the file name but without really changing the content? Do you think the hash value will change again? Now you can go ahead and try this and see what happens. Hashing is used in many places in digital forensics. Now you understand its concept and practical application, which takes you one step closer to becoming a competent digital forensics investigator. There are various implementations of hash algorithms. One of the well-known hash algorithms is Md5 that is still popular in digital forensics. However, it's proven to be vulnerable. There is another algorithm called Secure Hash Algorithm, or SHA, which is a more secure version of Md5. There are SHA-1, SHA-2, and SHA-3. These are just different variations of SHA. Collision is a known vulnerability in hash algorithms. It occurs when two different files produce the same hash value when put through the same algorithm. As you can see in this diagram, file 1 and file 2 are different, but when they go through the same hash algorithm, sometimes it's possible that you could end up with the same hash value. This almost never happens, but theoretically speaking, this could occur. Collisions have been found in both Md5 and SHA. A way to make a hash algorithm less vulnerable is to increase the size of its output. The bigger the hash value, the less the possibility of a collision. That is, a bigger hash value means stronger and more secure hashing. Many of the computer forensics tools available today come equipped with built-in hash functions. The main purpose of these built-in hash features is the verification and validation of your data you're working on in your computer forensics investigation. For example, there is a tool called FTK Imager, and it comes with both Md5 and SHA hash algorithms. An alternative to using these built-in hash options is manually computing hash values. As we saw in another lesson, you can use a Linux operating system's hash implementations, such as Md5 Sum. In this lesson, let's try the hash features of the FTK Imager. Before we move forward, let's make sure that you have a USB drive plugged into your computer. First, choose File, and then choose Create Disk Image. We'll go for the default choice, Physical Drive, and click on Next. From the list, choose your USB drive. Click on Finish. Now it's asking for image destinations. Click on Add, and we need to select the destination image type. We'll be using the raw image type, which is DD. Click on Next. I chose DD because it's a universal imaging format used by many other tools. Here, we'll use case number as 001, evidence number also 001, unique description as test, examiner 001, and we'll type test for the notes field. Click on Next. Now we'll choose the image destination folder. Click on Browse. we'll choose the destination folder as our desktop and then click on OK. This way, we can see the image being created on our desktop. The image file name I'll be using is USB drive. Here, you have an option of breaking your image file into multiple files. It's called fragmentation. In this case, I don't want to do this. That's why I type 0 here. Click on Finish. Note that there is an option of verifying images after they're created. By selecting this option, at the end of the imaging process, you'll have the hash values of of the image files. Make sure you choose that option and click on Start. As you can see, once the imaging is done, the FTK Imager tool will display the MD5 hash value of the image and also the SHA-1 hash value of the image. This demonstrates the built-in hash functions of the FTK Imager tool. Note that the FTK Imager tool computed the hash values before copying begins, and then it gets the hash values again after the copying is done. And it shows that the hash values match. Mounting is a concept related to partitioning. We already learned about partitioning in another lesson. Mounting is the process of making a partition visible to an operating system or OS, and eventually to an end user, especially on a Linux OS. Unmounting is the opposite. Connecting a drive and making it available to an OS can be dangerous because your OS can write to it. Another concept related to mounting is that of a mount point. It's simply a directory where a partition is made visible after mounting is done. Let's do a quick demo of mounting here. I already have my USB drive plugged into my computer. As soon as you plug in your USB drive, you'll see an icon like this. And what this means is that your OS picked up your USB drive. This is probably the last thing you want in your computer forensics workstation because your OS could have written to your USB drive, which could be your evidence drive. This happened because the OS we are using is not a forensic copy. It's a regular copy of Ubuntu OS. In a forensic copy, the OS won't automatically mount a USB drive like this. Therefore, we'll start by unmounting our USB drive. To unmount a USB drive, simply type umount and then the name of the partition. But in this case, we don't know what the name of the partition is on the USB drive. To know the partition name, we need another command, which is fdisk. Type sudo space fdisk space option dash L. You cannot run your fdisk command directly because it requires an administrator privilege to run. So that's why we type in sudo in front. This is equivalent to run as administrator on a Windows OS. We also need a command to trim the output of the fdisk command to only show what we are interested in. This is why I use pipe space grep space dash I space dv, which will display only the lines containing the string dev. Now I'll press enter. We see all the storage devices connected to our computer and partitions on them. The storage device we're interested in is our USB drive. In this case, the USB drive and its partition are showing up as /dv/SDB1. This is a name to use to unmount the USB drive. I know that it's SDB because SDA is the first disk drive letter referring to a hard drive, and I also know that there's only one hard drive attached to my machine. The next drive letter is supposed to be SDB, which is my USB drive. Now we're ready. Type sudo umount. Note that it's not unmount but umount. And then the name of the partition, which is /dev/sdb1. Pay attention to the naming convention here. dev/sdb refers to the entire physical drive. When we're referring to the individual partitions on the same physical drive, we're using a numbering system such as 1, 2, and 3, as we could have more than one partition on a physical drive. In this case, we're dealing with one partition, which is why we have a number 1 next to the drive name SDB. Now press enter, and as soon as you do that, you can see that the USB drive icon is now gone, and the drive is invisible to the operating system. We just learned how to unmount a partition, and this is very significant in your computer forensics investigation because a lot of times in your investigations, you want your storage device to stay unmounted. As I told you, in a forensic copy of your Linux OS, a storage device connected to your machine is not mounted by default. In case you're not dealing with an evidence drive and you simply want to mount the drive, here is how you do it. First, identify the drive and the partition you want to mount. From our lesson earlier, we know the partition is dev/sdb1. To mount it, first of all, we need to create a mount point. A mount point is a directory where you would like to see the content of a drive. Create a new directory by typing mkdir space and then the name of your mount point, and we'll call it USB_mounted. Press enter. Do ls to see what's in the current directory. As you can see now, we have a new directory created called USB_mounted. Let's see what's inside the newly created directory. Type cd space and the name of the mount point, USB_mounted. Press enter. Do another ls. Press enter. As you can see, there is nothing in the mount point directory we just created. Let's go back to the parent directory. Type cd space and 2 dots. cd here means change directory. The 2 dots signify the parent directory. So change your directory to the parent directory. We're going back to where we started. Press enter. Type ls again. Now we are ready to mount our partition. The command is sudo space mount space file format type option -t space vfat and then the name of the partition, which is /dev/sdb1 and space the name of the mount point. The directory was ./usb_mounted. The dot in front of the / symbol means the current directory. Now press enter. If you don't get any error messages, the partition has been successfully mounted. Let's see if it works. To check if the partition has been mounted successfully, we have to go to the mount point. Let's do change directory to the mount point, which is cd space USB_mounted. Press enter. Type ls. Now, you see the files and the folders on the partition because the partition has been successfully mounted. As a computer forensics investigator, it's nice to have a way to control when a drive is mounted and unmounted. After taking key precautions to preserve your evidence, you're finally ready to acquire your data. There are many ways of acquiring data in computer forensics. Static acquisition is one of the most basic and common ways to acquire data. Static acquisition retrieves data from a non-volatile source such as a hard drive or USB drive. In a non-volatile source, data still remains on the storage device after power is turned off. Live acquisitions are becoming more necessary these days because of changes in the computing technologies, particularly in the area of encryption. Live acquisition acquires data from a volatile source such as main memory, also known as random access memory or RAM. In a volatile source, data goes away from the storage device after it's turned off. In a volatile source, data goes away from the storage device after the power is turned off. In addition to the static and live acquisitions, there is another type of acquisition, which is remote acquisition. Remote acquisition is done through a network connection and involves a client-server architecture. In many cases, you install a client on a machine from which you want to retrieve the data. Remote acquisition is a form of live acquisition because it requires an up-and-running computing device, whether it's a server or a client. The current trend I observe is that live and remote acquisitions are becoming more prevalent due to the encryption challenge. Static acquisitions are more difficult, especially these days, because a data drive gets encrypted when a computing device is inactive. What this means is that by the time you're trying to do a static acquisition, all you can get is an encrypted version of the data you're seeking. There are plenty of open source utilities out there you can use to get an image of a drive. We'll try to use an open source tool called DD to get an image of a USB drive. Our goal here is to get an image of an entire physical drive rather than a partition on the physical drive. Therefore, we'll be using /dev/SDB instead of DEV SDB1 to refer to our USB drive. We already looked at finding out how a USB drive is recognized in a file system on Ubuntu. The command here is very simple. Just type sudo space dd space if. if here stands for input file =dev/sdb instead of SDB1, which is a partition. Next, type a space and then OF or output file and then the target file name of the image. Let's use USB underscore image /USB underscore image. The dot here once again stands for the current directory, and then the extension .dd. Press enter. Because we're using sudo, it's asking for the password. Press enter. After you type your password, the imaging process has just now begun, and until it's done, your command prompt won't return. One way of checking whether the file has been actually created is to open another terminal window to see the name of the file showing up in your directory. So we'll just do that, and then simply type ls. Go to File, choose New Window, press Enter. As you can see, the file has been created. The file will be getting bigger and bigger as the imaging process is being done. Now, I'll type ls space -l to list some more details of the file. ls space -l, press Enter. The file size is showing up here. Let's try ls-l again. The file size is bigger. This means that the imaging process is going on successfully. DD is one of the most basic tools out there you can use to get your simple imaging task done. But there are more advanced tools for the imaging task you can use to make your job as a computer forensics investigator a little easier. One of these tools is Dcfldd, a forensic version of DD. There is also a way to split your image file into multiple fragments. This is sometimes necessary because you have to put it on media which have very limited capacities. To do this, we can use DD together with another Linux utility. Type DD space input file /dev SDB, which is the physical USB drive connected to my computer. Instead of typing OF or output file, and then target file name here, we'll be using something called a filter. The role of a filter in Unix or Linux is that it will be taking the output of the previous command and pass that output as an input to the next command. Whatever is coming out of the DD input file command, the output of that will go to the next command as an input. In this case, the output sent as an input will be the image file, but we'll be splitting it into multiple files. The command we need for this is split. The split file size of my choice here is 650 megabyte. That's why we type pipe space split space -b space 650 m space dash space USB image and type a dot as a file extension so that when the files are created, they will be beginning with this name USB image dot. The file extensions will be different in a sequential order to reflect the fact that a single image file is now split into multiple files. You need sudo in front to run this command. Press Enter. The imaging process has begun. While it's getting done, we can go ahead and open up another terminal window to see the progress. Go to File, New Window. Type ls, press Enter. Type ls again, press Enter. So far, there has been only one file created, USB image.aa, but there will be additional files getting created. Now you see some additional files, USB image AB, USB image AC. There will still be more files coming after these. By learning about these additional options for imaging, you can have more flexibility in dealing with whatever situation is thrown at you. Dcfldd is a forensic version of DD. It's also an open source and free computer forensics tool. I'll teach you how to use Dcfldd to acquire an image from a USB drive. We'll start by typing Dcfldd. Just as in the dd command, type if input file =, and the location of your source drive, in this case our USB drive, which is /dev/sdb, and then space of output file =, and then the target file name. We'll call it usbimage.dd. Here we'll be using a couple more options which is not available to DD. We'll use hash algorithm Md5 option. So type hash =Md5 space. We'll also create a hash log and then name the log file as usbimage.log. So type hash log =usbimage.log. What this will do is, by the end of the imaging process, Dcfldd will be producing an Md5 hash value of the image, and then store the hash value in the usbimage.log file. Another nice feature of Dcfldd is that it shows the status of your imaging process. It shows how many bytes have been written so far. You need to run this command as root again, so add sudo in the very beginning. Press enter. The imaging process is finally over. Let's check the usbimage.log file. To see the content of this file, we'll be using a command called more. Type more space usbimage.log. Press enter. As you can see, the Md5 hash value of your image is now showing. Let's also check whether the image file has been created. Type ls, press enter, and you can see usbimage.dd file. As you can tell, Dcfldd has more computer forensics features compared to DD. Plus, it's easier to use. Although the Dcfldd software is free, you may still have to install it to your favorite Linux distribution. If you'd like to learn more about Dcfldd, please check out this website. FTK Imager can also serve as a live acquisition tool. Here is how you do it. Go to File, choose Capture Memory. You have to specify what is your destination path next. Click on Browse. Let's make our destination folder as our desktop. Click OK. And then click on Capture Memory. I'm working on a computer with a lot of RAM, and we'll pick up when the imaging process is done. Finally, the memory capturing process has been finished successfully. Click on Close. You can see the memory dump file named memdump.mem. To analyze the result of your live acquisition, you still need a separate software program. You can use a professional solution such as FTK or Forensics Toolkit by Access Data. You can also use an open source solution such as Volatility, which we already looked at. Of course, the tool can be as simple as a Hex Editor too. Before we finish, we'll try to open this file we just created in a Hex Editor and try to see what's inside. Now I'm going to open Hex Workshop, go to File, Open, and choose memdump.mem. Click Open. Let's do a search. Click on the Find icon. Choose text string. Type password. Click OK. As you can see, you can find every occurrence of the word password in your entire memory dump file like this. Therefore, a simple Hex editor like Hex Workshop can already do this much work. Can you imagine what you'll be able to accomplish if you had a much more sophisticated tool like Volatility, which is dedicated to analyzing the live acquisition data? Volatility is an open source live acquisition tool. You can download it from this website. Let me show you how to use Volatility in this lesson. You can bring it up by pressing the Windows key and R key together. Type CMD and click on OK. Type dir. You can see that I already copied the Volatility program to my local user directory. I also copied my memory dump file here. Now you're all set. Type the entire name of the Volatility executable file. You can press Tab to use the auto-completion feature. Space. Now use an option -F. And then the name of the memory dump file. In this case, windows.raw. The first thing we're trying to do here is to learn more about the memory dump file and the operating system from which the memory dump file was made. For that, we use the keyword image_info. Now press enter. And now you have your results back. One of the key things you have to look for is the phrase suggested profile. The suggested profile is what Volatility thinks which operating system the memory dump is coming from. It's a guess, which is why we have multiple choices here. We'll use Win7SP1x64 for our next step. Although Volatility cannot pinpoint an exact OS here, the results you're going to be getting in the next step will be comparable no matter what profile option you choose here. Next, we're going to try to display all the processes that were running when the memory dump was made. We again use the same command. However, this time, instead of using the keyword image_info, we'll be using a different keyword. Let's recall the command we just issued by using the up arrow key. We don't need image_info anymore, but we need a new option, --profile =, and then the suggested profile choice we made earlier, which was Win7SP_x64. So highlight it. Let's make a copy and then use the key combination Control-V to paste it, space, and another new keyword, which is PSList. That is process list. Now, all you have to do is press enter. What you're seeing here is all the processes that were running when the memory was captured. A tool like Volatility provides computer forensics investigators with lots of very useful information. Therefore, one of the very first things you may want to do when you arrive at a crime scene is to conduct a live acquisition by using a tool like Volatility. Digital forensics investigators spend the majority of their time analyzing their data. Analysis is the culmination of a forensics investigation process. All the work we do for preparing, preserving, and acquiring data is really for making the analysis step go smoothly. Analyzing data involves lots of searching, and indexing is a technique that helps accelerate the search process. All major digital forensics products use indexing to improve their speed. Autopsy is an open-source digital forensics suite. It comes with powerful search and report generation features. It's really nice that you can download Autopsy for free and try it for learning purposes. Commercial forensics software suites are quite expensive and even cost-prohibitive for individuals. If you work for a small organization with limited budget or have personal needs to conduct digital forensics investigations, Autopsy is a perfect tool for that. We have a couple of dedicated lessons to check it out more. It's also nice to explore specialized forensics utilities like Hex Workshop. Although not free, you can download a trial version and play with it. There are some very useful features like bit shifting and file type information extracting, which Hex Workshop provides. Criminals are always trying to mislead you to protect their secrets, but a tool like Hex Workshop can help you see through all their deceptions. In addition to changing file extensions and shifting bits in a file, crooks and spies also hide information in picture files. A steganography tool like Openstackl is what they use to do this. We have a lesson for it too, and you will get a decent exposure. There are many more data analysis techniques and mechanisms out there. What we cover in this course is only the tip of an iceberg. Although not exhaustive, you will still have a good feel for what analysis means in digital forensics by the time you're done with all the lessons in this chapter. Indexing is another very important feature in a computer forensics software suite, especially in terms of searching. Indexing refers to the process of creating a catalog by going through an evidence drive and recording the location of each data item. To give you an analogy, creating an index for a book is similar to creating an index for an evidence drive. Once you create an index in your book, you can go to a page of your interest very quickly based on a keyword. The same applies to your evidence drive. Once you have your indexing done, the speed of searching gets faster because there is now a direct mapping between your search keyword and the location containing the keyword in your evidence drive. All you have to do is to go to a location according to the index without really having to do the same search over and over again every time you look for a keyword. Initially, indexing takes a long time because it has to go through every single data item in your evidence drive and then somehow record the location of each data item according to its keyword. Therefore, typically, when you try to acquire an image out of an evidence drive, you always have an option to do your indexing. Indexing is sometimes referred to as pre-processing. When you see the word pre-processing, you should associate that word with indexing. Having the ability to search is essential in digital forensics. Investigators always have needs to do their keyword searches tied to their investigations. To demonstrate how a search is conducted in a computer forensics suite, let's use Autopsy. Autopsy is one of the most popular computer forensics software suites out there, and I highly recommend it. We'll start by creating a new case. Click on New Case. Type your case name. We'll use 001. Choose your base directory. We'll click on Browse and choose Desktop. Click on Next and use case number 001. You don't have to fill out the rest of the information. Click on Finish. Now, the next step involves loading an image. I already created an image of an evidence drive. We'll be using that image for this exercise. Click on Disk Images or VM file. Click on Next. Click on Browse. Choose USB image.001. Click on Open. By the way, you'll find this image file in your exercise folder. Click Next. Click Next again. Click on Finish. Your image is now successfully loaded. Go ahead and select Data Sources. Click on the plus sign. Click on the plus sign next to USB image.001. Select Volume 2. And you can see the files inside that volume. One of the things you notice here is files with X marks. What this means is that the files have been deleted. However, your computer forensics suite is able to detect these deleted files, and you can even recover them by right-clicking on the file. For example, dreamcar.jpg, and then choose Extract Files. We'll now try to export the file to our desktop. So go ahead and choose Desktop and click on Save. And you see the file just created on your desktop. Let's see if we can open it. What a handsome car. Now let's go ahead and close it. Click on OK here. Next, we'll conduct a search, which is our main mission here. We'll try to find all the files that contain a name, in this case, Bill. So click on Keyword Search. Type Bill here. And then click on Search. Out of all the files we have on the disk image, there is only one file that contains the name Bill. This is a very useful feature, not only for conducting your computer forensics investigation, but also for anything you do on a daily basis. You always have a need for looking for a file according to a keyword. Of course, any computer forensics software suite should come with a feature like this, but they're not all created equally. How well their search feature works could be a good way to measure the quality of a computer forensics suite. Having the ability to auto-generate a report is a very useful feature. Investigators usually auto-generate their reports and use them as a starting point. We'll use Autopsy to demonstrate how you can auto-generate a digital forensics report. We already loaded our image here. First, let's mark a piece of evidence so that it appears in your report. Go to Data Source, click on the plus sign, choose USB image, click on the plus sign, click on Volume 2. Let's pick a file here. I'm going to choose dreamcar.jpg again. Do a right click and then choose Add File Tag. Next, select Tag and Comment. I'm going to leave a comment as comment. Click on OK. And you can see the icon over there. Now, the evidence is marked and it's going to show up in your report for sure. Let's generate our report. Go to Tools, choose Generate Report. The default choice is fine, HTML report. Click on Next. Click on Finish. Close. To see your report, go to Reports. Click on HTML report. Double-click it. Now, next to the star icon, you see tagged files. Click on the link, and you can see the actual picture file. Go back. As you can see, the evidence you marked is now showing up with your comments, which is comment right there. Any mainstream computer forensics software suite should come with a feature to auto-generate a report like this. If you don't see it, you should seriously doubt the quality of the software. Criminals often simply change the extensions of files to mislead computer forensics investigators. With the wrong file extension, it's difficult to know exactly what the original file type was. To find out the true type of a file, you could use a Hex Editor. We have a mystery file here on the desktop called secret.jpg. And now I'll try to open it with the built-in Windows Photos app. The Windows Photos app is complaining because this is not a picture file, and that is a clue that something's not right with the file extension. Let's close the Photos app and then open Hex Workshop. Click on File, click Open, choose secret.jpg, click Open. What you see here is all in hex numbers. These beginning bits of the file are called the file signature. The file signature of this file is 50-4B-03-04-14-00-06-00. And this is our lead. It also shows .xml here, and we know somehow it's related to XML, but we don't know exactly what file type this is. For later use, let's simply copy the file signature. Go to Edit, choose Copy. Now let's close Hex Workshop. There are tables of file signatures, and they're called magic tables. You can find them on the internet. Here is one such website featuring a search option. Let's choose signature and paste our file signature right here into the search field. Hit Submit. As soon as I do that, multiple matches show up. Now I know it's MS Office 2007 file signature. Next, we'll try to change the file extension of the image file and see what happens. Let's try docx. Choose Rename. Change the file extension to OCX. Press enter. It's asking whether I really want to do this, and the answer is yes. Click on yes. Let's try to open the file. And the file opens successfully, which means that this is the right file type. And it says, this is a test. Did you enjoy this experience? After this, you should be able to find out the true file types of any files out there whose file extensions might have been changed. Many times, criminals simply shift bits in a file to hide the secret. In this case, to reveal the secret, all you have to do is to shift the bits back to their original positions. To do this, you can use a hex editor. Here we have a mystery file called secret.txt. Let me try to open this file using Notepad. I don't know what happened to the original text, but my strong suspicion is that the bits in the file might have been shifted. To know whether this is true or not, I'm going to open this file in Hex Workshop. Go to File, click Open, choose secret.txt, open. To shift the bits in this file, you have to make some changes in the configuration of Hex Workshop first. Go to Options, choose Toolbars, select Data Operations, and enable it. Click OK. As soon as you do that, you see buttons to shift bits to the right or to the left. We'll try to shift the bits to your left first. Click on this icon. I'm going to set it to 8 bits. Click OK. It's still scrambled. Now let's try to shift the bits to your right. Close the file. Don't save the changes. Let's open the file again. Now I'll try to shift the bits to my right. Click this icon. Set it to change the bit. Open. To shift the bits in this file, you have to make some changes in the configuration of Hex Workshop first. Go to Options, choose Toolbars, select Data Operations, and enable it. Click OK. As soon as you do that, you see buttons to shift bits to the right or to the left. We'll try to shift the bits to your left first. Click on this icon. I'm going to set it to 8 bits. Click OK. It's still scrambled. Now let's try to shift the bits to your right. Close the file. Don't save the changes. Let's open the file again. Now I'll try to shift the bits to my right. Click this icon. Set it to 8-bit. Click OK. As you can see, the secret message is now revealed. Shifting bits is one of the most basic techniques you can use to hide your secret. Maybe you can use this technique to keep your secret diary. Steganography is a way to hide information inside the picture file. Just like any other files, we store pictures in zeros and ones on our computer. The smallest unit of a picture is a pixel, and a picture file stores each pixel information in a binary number in a raster file format. Assume that we use 24 bits to store a pixel. If we change the last bit of each pixel data, it won't change the pixel too much in terms of its color. This is why we can change a picture by embedding our own information into the pixel data and still make it look indistinguishable from its original. If we have 10,000 pixels in a picture, we have 10,000 opportunities to slightly change their binary representations. Openstackl is a free steganography tool. You can download it from this website. Let's give it a try. The user interface is fairly simple. The first field asks for a message to hide. I already created a secret message called message.txt, and this is what it looks like. And let's go ahead and load it. The cover file refers to an image where my secret message will be embedded. It's this image file, olips.png, and let's load it too. Output.stego file is a new picture file to be created out of my cover file and will contain the secret message file information. I'll just specify the path and the file name here. We'll call the new file stego.png. We also have an option to encrypt the secret message. We'll use the default encryption algorithm, which is AES. We'll also provide the password. That's it. Click on Hide Data. And you see the stego file just created. Let's open the stego.png file side by side to the olips.png file. Can you tell the difference? I can't. It'll be extremely difficult to find out which image is the one containing secrets unless you created it. Thanks for watching this course. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you're interested in taking your skills a step further, I suggest you check out my course, Protecting Your Network with Open Source Software. Network security is a newly emerging field of digital forensics. This course will give you a very good exposure to network security. Another course I recommend is Learning Ubuntu Desktop with Scott Simpson. As you saw in my videos, there's a lot of need for Linux knowledge for computer forensics specialists. Finally, I recommend Python Essential Training with Bill Weinman. Many of the computer forensics tools allow you to write scripts to automate some of the mundane computer forensics tasks. Knowing a language like Python will help you a lot. Now, thank you again and see you next time.